All right, wonderful. We have 26 people on so far, and I'm sure that more people will join over the next few minutes. But let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to welcome everybody to this next webinar in our JET Alumni webinar series. My name is Paugh Simons Lane. I'm the Executive Director of US JET AA, and I was a JET in Gunma Prefecture from 2005 to 2007. For those of you who don't know, I think most of you probably do know what US JET AA is, but just briefly, US JET AA is the United States JET Alumni Association, and we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., but serving the whole United States. And our mission is to further US-Japan relations by providing support for alumni of the JET program, such as yourself. So if you're not already a member of US JET AA, please do become a member. It is free, or if you're feeling generous, you can become a supporting member at $75 a year and help support our programming like this. We are a nonprofit, so we run completely on grants and donations. So anything you can do to help is always appreciated. Before we get into this webinar, I just wanted to let you know that we're working on some webinars for next month, though they haven't been scheduled yet. We will be doing a webinar for chapter leaders. I think there's a few chapter leaders on here, and that one is going to focus on handling pre-departure orientations when you probably can't physically get together with the departing jets. We also are working on a TESOL webinar, and then in July, we'll be doing career-based webinars, one on careers in higher education administration and one on careers in the foreign service. So please check our social media and our website for information about that. If you're interested in more career webinars like the one you'll hear today, we have some recordings that would be interesting to you. One is the new normal, working during COVID, which is our first one focusing on this new reality that we have all found ourselves in. And then our last webinar was on personal branding, and the recordings for those are available on our website and our YouTube channel. And I will drop the YouTube link to our channel in the chat at some point once I turn this over to Ryan. So now I'm going to turn this before I turn this over to Ryan, actually, let's go to the next slide, and I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded. We request that you use the Q&A feature or the chat to ask questions. Q&A is preferred, and you will find it usually at the bottom of your screen. If you're using a mobile phone, you may have to tap the screen in order to bring up Q&A. We will not be taking audio questions today. Results in too many technical difficulties. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them anytime. Feel free to use the Q&A feature. And yes, I see someone is raising their hand. Don't use that one, use the one next to it on the right that says Q&A to type in your question. The arrow kind of was pointing to that whole bottom part. Maybe I should change that slide for ease of use. Okay, now without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Ryan Paugh. Ryan was a JET in Takayama from 2006 to 2008, and he spent more than 10 years traveling the world as an entrepreneur, coach, speaker, and sales leader. And I know he's going to tell you a lot about himself, so I'm not going to go any further into the introduction about Ryan, and I'll just turn it over to Ryan. I will be back on video at the end for the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Paugh. And hello to everyone. Thrilled to be on the call with you today. And I'm going to be taking you guys through my journey as I went through JET, came out of JET, and found my way into a career. And as I share my story, I'm hopeful that you guys will be able to take away some actionable items that each of you can apply as it relates to your own careers. When I landed in Japan back in August of 2006, I have to say that I had no idea what I was in for. You know, like so many of you, I'm sure when you went on your JET journey, I thought that I would go out to Japan for a year, have an international experience, and turn around and come on back home. But let me tell you, that is not how my journey went at all. Never could I have imagined that it would actually be 15 years before I would ever live in America again. I certainly couldn't have imagined that shortly after my time on Jet, I would find myself unemployed, pulling a rickshaw in the slums of India. But perhaps the biggest surprise of all came just after my rickshaw pulling days when I walked in and joined one of the biggest, most innovative, fastest growing companies in the world at the time, LinkedIn, and in Singapore. And I just remember thinking to myself, how did I get here? You know, it wasn't too long ago that I was just an English teacher in rural Japan. And now here I am working at an organization that had 1 million people apply to work for it in this particular year. And so what I would like to do in order to fill in some of the gaps in the teaser that I just gave you guys there for my story, I want to take you back, help you understand the beginning of the journey, the middle, and the end. And my journey started in one of the most unlikely of places, town called Gaithersburg, Maryland, out in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., certainly not a part of the country that would be considered international. I certainly didn't grow up with any Asian friends, not any Japanese restaurants of any sort. And so quite surprising that when I did graduate from school, I found myself with an overwhelming curiosity to go and see the world. And it's with that curiosity that I met my first love, the JET program, which took me to Japan. And when I thought about going on JET in Japan, I really just had three goals. I wanted to get lost, confused, and I wanted to be pulled outside of my comfort zone. And I can tell you guys with pretty high confidence that I achieved all three of these goals. I was lost on my very first day as a JET teacher in Gifuken, Hida Takayama. My goal was to get on a bus and make it 15 minutes to my elementary school. So you can imagine my surprise when an hour and a half later, I got off at the end of the bus ride, somehow 60 miles north of my town. I had completely missed my town. I had completely missed my school. Had to get on the phone and have my teachers come rescue me. I ended up missing all of my first classes on my very first day. So I achieved getting lost pretty quickly. Confused, I'm sure we all have lots of stories of being confused in Japan. One of my favorites is going to buy clothes washing liquid at the store, coming back, putting in the washer, and having my entire apartment fill with bubbles. Shortly after, I realized I actually bought dishwashing detergent and not washing detergent. There is a difference. And as far as stepping outside your comfort zone, Japan, right? Coming from the United States and stepping into a culture that's so different. Every single day of our lives on JET was an example of being outside of our comfort zone. But this experience hooked me. And I was so transformed by experiencing a world so different that I wanted more. And so after joining an executive search firm in Tokyo and working my way up there for 4 years, I convinced our CEO at the time to send me to China to launch our business in China. And so I lived in Shanghai after 6 years in Japan. So 2 years on JET, 4 years as an executive recruiter in Tokyo, moved to Shanghai, lived there for a year, picked up a bit of Putonghua, really started to build a broader understanding of the region of Asia and how different places are to Japan, for those of you who were able to travel in the region. And after a year in China, I said, you know what, I want more of the world. And just having a job is holding me back. So at the peak of my career, in a lot of ways, I quit on my 30th birthday and I went traveling. I had a backpack and a camera and I just bought one-way tickets and I found myself in all kinds of adventures. I did my first 10-day silent meditation retreat in Burma. I learned how to ride a motorcycle in Thailand. I crashed a motorcycle in Nepal. I rafted the Nile. I lived with a shaman for 2 weeks. And somewhere along all of those travels, I developed a pose. And this pose was just born out of excitement and zest for all of these life experiences. And I was on a mission to soak them up and to learn from these cultures. And I continued falling in love with life with each additional adventure. And about a year and a half in, I was in India, sitting on the curb, and I actually got an email from LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, they had found my profile that I had built on LinkedIn about a year and a half earlier, and they thought that I could be a match for a new job opportunity in Singapore. I had never been in Singapore at the time, but I thought, sure, sounds like a new adventure. So I flew to Singapore for an interview and was fortunate enough to be offered the opportunity. This is what I looked like when I interviewed with LinkedIn. They probably would not have hired me if they had known that that's what I look like. This is what I look like on my very first day at LinkedIn. I shaved the beard, but I maintained the pose that I had developed over my travels. And as I look back from my time at LinkedIn all the way back to what got me there, there was a very clear point in my journey, my life journey and my professional journey. And that was the decision to go on JET. It really was the JET program that put my life and my career on a completely different trajectory. The job that I got in Tokyo was a result of my Japanese experience, my JET program experience. And even when LinkedIn hired me, they hired me largely because of the life experiences I had developed as a result of JET. And so I shared this story with you guys as my story, but it's not just my story, it's your story, because every single one of you also went on a journey to some extent, even if it didn't look exactly like mine. You went overseas to a land very different from the one you grew up in, and you learned and you grew and you had a life experience that is very unique. And as you start to think about how you can most effectively weave this experience into your professional journey, whether that is those of you who are early in your career, whether you've just finished JET this year, last year, in the last 5 years, and the last 10 years, there's always going to be an opportunity for you to think more deeply about how JET has influenced who you are as a person. And there are ways for you to think strategically about how to best communicate that story to potential employers. And the reality is that the world has changed significantly over the last 5 to 10 years. And this is good for all of you. This is good for JETs. And I want to explain that. A career to your parents' parents, perhaps your grandparents and older, a career to them was equivalent to a steamboat. They typically would find one job, they would choose a career, and they would get in that career and they would plunge forward for a professional career, right? They typically have one job. My father worked on an oil rig, my grandfather worked on an oil rig, and that's all he did for his entire career. Then we have our parents' generations. And their generation started to have multiple careers. And so this is more akin to a sailboat. And computers were invented. Technology became an important part of jobs. And so as they thought about working through their careers, they had to learn how to work with the winds a little bit. And they were going to have to change a few times, change jobs, perhaps once or twice, maybe even change careers, most of them once or twice. And they also needed to learn how to use technology. But here's the world that you guys live in, that I live in, that we live in. I call it the whitewater world. It is a world where there is constant change and turning like never before. Entire industries are transformed almost overnight. I think I saw a stat that the shelf life of a Fortune 500 company used to be 50 or 60 years. Now those companies only last on average 15 years. By the age of 35, people today will now have had between 7 and 9 different jobs. You also have technology, AI, continuing to change the way that we work. And so what it means to have a career today is very different than what it looked like in the past. Why is this good news for Jets? This is good news for Jets because organizations around the world for soft skills. What do I mean by soft skills? Per a LinkedIn study done asking organizations what it is that they are looking for in candidates at all levels. I'm not just talking about whether you're early in your career, middle of your career, later of your career. This applies. It is no longer the hard skills that are most important. It's the soft skills because the hard skills are changing. They have a short half-life. Organizations are looking for people that are creative, adaptable, curious, people who have the capacity to learn and to collaborate. So here's a question for all of you. When you look at this list of soft skills, did these show up at all during your time on Jet? Were there situations as a Jet where you had to be creative, adaptable, curious? Were there times when you had to learn or collaborate? I'm sure all of you agree that these 5 things are at the core what the JET program develops in its participants. That was my experience. Creativity, trying to ask someone where the bathroom is without being able to communicate, right? Adaptability, landing in a world so different from yours and having to learn their ways and their traditions and to adapt to the cultural norms in Japan. Curiosity. I don't think that all of you already demonstrated very high levels of curiosity just by going on this journey, in this adventure. Learner. You all learned the language to some extent. There's no one on this call that did not go to Japan and learn something about the language, whether it was the grammar, was the kanji, speaking. You learned about Japanese traditions. I learned about Japanese meditation. I learned a lot about Japanese history. I learned that harmony is incredibly important in Japanese society compared to freedom being the most important value in the United States. All kinds of things that you've learned in collaboration every day in the teacher's room, having to collaborate with teachers to put lessons together, having to collaborate with other jets, right? So the JET program, whether you realize it or not, really served as a boot camp for these types of soft skills that are important now more than ever before. What each of you want to be thinking about is how to tell your story, your professional story. So if you are currently unemployed and looking for work, you need to form your story. If you are currently employed but interested to identify other career opportunities, maybe you're looking to move up or move out, maybe you're looking to make a career change, you also have to form your story. A good interview is one where a candidate's story makes sense. And so when it comes to storytelling, you gotta have your own. You must reflect, you must understand, and you must market your story. So let's walk through each of these. Reflect. We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. Even for those of you who did JET for, let's say, 1 year only, and let's say that was several years ago, you had a vast, diverse set of life experiences that helped you develop, whether you realize it or not. But it's not enough just to have had that experience. You really need to do some digging, and you really need to reflect on it. It's been, 12 years since I left JET. I still reflect on my time on JET and my time in Japan, and I still am uncovering insights about how it shaped me and what I took away from the experience still to this day. So reflecting is never done. And I'm going to provide some questions that you guys can use to facilitate reflection. What have you learned about the world since your time on JET? What have you learned about yourself? What challenges have you faced? What challenges did you face? How did you overcome those challenges? What are you most proud of from your time on JET? And what are some of the specific experiences that you can remember that had the most lasting impact on you from your time on JET? These are 5 questions to just start recalling and reflecting on what the JET era was for you. And what's great about these particular questions that I've outlined for you guys is that they're going to look a lot like interview questions that you might get. You might have an interviewer ask you about an example of something that you learned or a specific challenge that you faced and how you overcame it. These are called behavioral interview questions. They're becoming increasingly popular at organizations. What are you most proud of as it relates to your experience in Japan? And can you share a specific example of an experience that impacted you in a meaningful way? It's not uncommon for questions like this to surface. So in doing your reflections about your time on JET, you are simultaneously preparing for interviews. This is about packaging your story, something that we know the Japanese do particularly well is packaging. And so this is one way for you guys to be thinking about it. So once you've reflected, second is to really understand, okay, I understand, Ryan, what I've taken away from my experience, but now you got to figure out, what do you want and what does the world need as it relates to work? This is a graph that, an image that some of you might be familiar with, a Japanese concept called ikigai, which is oftentimes known to translate to a reason for living, a why. And moving from the top to the right, starting at the top, you have the things that you love to do. On the right, you have the things that the world needs. You have the things that you can be paid for, and you have the things that you're good at. And a great exercise is to take this image and a piece of paper and just make 4 lists. What are the things that you love, interests and tasks, things that you love to do? What are the things that you're good at, skills, things that you've learned about yourself that you have a capacity for? What are existing jobs that you know that exist that you can be paid for? And what are some of the things that you think the world needs? Make those 4 lists and then start to look for the overlaps. If you find something that you love and you're good at, that's a passion, which is great. But you're also, if you want to move that into your professional life, you got to find a way to get paid for it, right? So that's when you move down into the profession. And so the ikigai obviously is the bullseye. It's something nice to aim for, which is when you have all 4 of those things in place. Lastly, you want to market yourself. And there's 2 approaches that I see as a career coach that people use to market themselves. There's the butterfly approach and there's the dragon approach. Here's the butterfly approach. You write your resume, you ask a few friends if they know of any companies hiring, you send a few resumes, you put on your favorite Netflix shows, send a few more resumes, And then you find yourself complaining that you just can't find work. This is the butterfly approach, and it pretty much starts and ends here. What would a dragon approach look like? Resume. The dragons create a best-in-class CV and a LinkedIn profile, incorporating all of the things that they've learned from their reflection exercises and the questions that I shared before from the Ikigai reflections. They then go straight to networking. They connect with alumni from their university. They connect with alumni from JETS. And they set a target to have 10 chats with people in each group. They say, I'm going to have 10 conversations with people in my university network, and I'm going to have 10 conversations with people in my JET network. I'm going to network, and I'm going to learn about what's out there, and I'm going to try to identify career opportunities. Then they take the passive approach to applying to jobs, which is to go online and submit your resume. That's passive. But then they also take the active or the more aggressive approach, which is to find companies that they know they would be interested in working at, companies or organizations. They find people who work at those organizations. You can do all of this on LinkedIn, and they send 25 direct messages. They set themselves this goal to reach out directly and ask if there are potential opportunities where they could be valuable. And lastly, having done that effectively, they have multiple offers and they're able to choose which offer they want. This is the dragon approach. What is so critical about the first two is that 85% of jobs that are filled today are filled through a referral. 85%. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that only 15%, if you only take the passive approach to applying for jobs, you just go on a job board and you submit your, only 15% of jobs are even getting filled that way. And how many people do you think are clicking to submit their CV? Hundreds, if not thousands. And they're all fighting for the 15% because the 85 is already being filled through the network, through people who know people, people at the company who are recommending someone. And so this is a reality. It's not particularly fair, but if you're going to put an effective strategy together to get the job that you want, you have to think thoughtfully about how to do it. And you can't just wait in line with the thousands of people that are submitting their resumes. You have to find ways to cut the line. And I don't say that in a nasty way, but in a strategic way. There are ways for you to cut the line. So let's walk through each one of these. Resume. I'm going to talk about the LinkedIn profile. Obviously, I worked at LinkedIn. I got my job at LinkedIn through LinkedIn. And I've just seen over and over again what a great resource it can be. So step number one is to have a good photo. Step number two is to have a unique headline on your profile. Step number three, on your LinkedIn profile, there's an opportunity to write a summary. But even better than a summary is your story. And the best practice here is to write in the first person. You're not writing a book, but you want to just write a couple short paragraphs so that a potential employer can understand who you are as a human being. Talk about things that you really care about. Talk about, what your professional journey has been like thus far. But write in the first person and write it more like a story. It'll allow employers to relate to you more. And step number four is you just want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is complete with all of your work experience. You don't want to leave everything out. You want to make sure that it's in there, and you want to make sure that you have summaries for every part of your professional journey. Networking. All right, so I'm taking you guys through kind of a number of steps here. 1, 2, 3, 4, so your resume. Step number 5, we're getting into networking here. You can go on to LinkedIn. I mean, also, I know that US Jet AA has an incredible alumni network. You can also go on LinkedIn. You can search for people that did Jet and you're going to find a wealth of people that have been on the JET program, thousands, and find some who are doing what you might want to do. Send them a message. Ask them if you could steal 30 minutes to understand how it is that they came to have the career that they have. Jets love to connect with Jets. It's why I said yes to Paugh when she asked me to do the seminar. It's why I will say yes to any one of you who reach out to me personally for support in your professional journey. Here's an example of how I would do this, guys. I find David Spears, who's an ex-Jet, and he's a co-founder at a young entrepreneurs company. I would reach out to David. I would send him a message on LinkedIn, and here's what I would say. Hey, David, as a fellow JET program alumni, it's incredibly inspiring to see the work you're doing with the circle of young entrepreneurs. As I prepare to close my own chapter on JET, I would so much love the opportunity to learn more about your journey as an entrepreneur. I too am passionate about social entrepreneurship, and I would love to find a way into the space. Would you be free and willing to connect for a 30-minute call this week or next? You guys can copy and paste this and make small edits. If you did JET 5 years ago, you can just say, hey, as an ex-JET, I would so much love the opportunity to learn more. People are waiting to help. They want to help. Here's a way that you can do it effectively. And here's just an example of 5 more Jets that I found on LinkedIn that you could reach out to. If you were interested in going and working for an embassy, here's Kyle, who's in marketing communications. Michael, who's a Python programmer. Catherine, who is the director of business development at Facebook. Paul, who's a brewer. The JET Alumni Network is so rich, you guys, with a wide, diverse group of professionals. Whatever it is that you want to do in your career, there's a JET that's doing it. Find them, reach out to them, have a conversation with them, and you will find that your career opportunities will open up. There's over 4,500 more JET alumni that I found on LinkedIn, just waiting. If you were going to do one thing to set yourself up for professional success, it would be to reach out to as many of those 4,500 people as you can. This is your low-hanging fruit. Then you're going to do the same thing with your university alumni. You're going to research your university alumni on LinkedIn who are doing what you want to do. You're going to send them a message, and you're going to set yourself a goal to have 10 conversations with university alumni. I went to Vanderbilt. I can go on LinkedIn. I can type in Vanderbilt University. I can pull up the university page. I can see that there are 78,500 alumni. I can see where these alumni live. I can see what companies they work at. And then down at the bottom there, I can start to see the specific individual alumni. This is absolute gold, guys. If you are looking for a job, or if you're looking for a different job, or you're looking for a career change, whatever it is that you're looking for that brought you to this webinar, the JET alumni and your university alumni are where you need to go fishing. So to summarize, the world of work has changed. You are going to have multiple careers, I promise you. So don't worry about choosing the right one. Just worry about finding the one that you want to do next, and feel confident that the experiences you had on JET for however long and however long ago it was, they have prepared you more than you think and more than you know for the world of work today. Reflect on your story. Understand where to find the balance between what you're good at, what you love, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. And lastly, dial up your fire breathing. Now more than ever before, with COVID-19, unemployment's at an all-time high. I mean, finding work and good work, even before COVID-19 was competitive. Now it's even more so. So I'm telling you guys that you're going to have to dial up the dragon. You're going to have to work harder. You're going to have to work smarter. You're going to have to be strategic. And if you do so, Jet will and has already set you up for success. So that is it for my presentation. I'm going to pass it back over to Paugh, and we'll see what kind of questions you guys have with our time left.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Great presentation. It's the third time I've heard it, but I find it really helpful information every time. And I really like that you mentioned to focus on what you want to do next, not necessarily what the big long-term 10 years out goal is going to be. It certainly served you well, it seems, in your career. We had some great questions come in. I'm going to take them in order. The first question from Stephen is this goes back to the very beginning of your presentation. What is an executive search firm, and what kind of work does being an executive recruiter entail?
Great question. So an executive search firm is a firm that helps companies find people to hire. So for example, when I was in Tokyo, you might have a US-based company, let's say Microsoft, that is trying to hire a marketing director in Japan, but they can't find one. It's very difficult to find one. They can't find one that's bilingual. And so they will come to our firm and they will say, can you help us find a marketing director? And an executive search firm will then go and do all of the hiring activities for a company. So it's essentially outsourced recruitment. And if our firm can successfully find a marketing director and they decide to hire that marketing director that we found, they will then pay us a fee for finding them a good person to hire. So that is what an executive search firm does. The day-to-day life, I think, was the second part of the question. It's a people business. I loved it. So you are constantly trying to find companies who are hiring and who need help hiring on the one side. And then on the other side, you are trying to find talented people who could potentially fit those roles. So you are always meeting people is essentially what the job is. Meet people. And when you're meeting candidates, you're also learning how to assess talent. You know, do they have the right skills? Do they have the right drive? Are they going to be a good culture fit for the company that is working with you or not? And then you are introducing those candidates. So you're essentially a matchmaker between a company and the people that they're trying to hire.
Thanks so much, Ryan. We did have a question come in that we've responded to in the chat. Someone asked, can you connect with Ryan on LinkedIn? Absolutely. I've dropped a link to his LinkedIn profile in the chat, or you can just search for him for Ryan Paugh on LinkedIn. The next question I'd like to take is, what would you say is the position between a butterfly and a dragon? Because I feel like I'm currently there and I'm having some trouble transitioning fully to the dragon side.
Well, I would throw a question back at you first, which is, what is it that's holding you back? And what do you think you could do to be more like a dragon? So I would ask yourself those questions first and see what you come up with. I can tell from the question that you haven't fully transitioned. there's some hesitation there. I mean, look, it's being a dragon is understanding that finding work and finding your dream work is a contact sport. I think of it more like football, you know, American football, where just the more contact you are making with people, the better. And so the transition in between a butterfly and dragon is probably someone who's done a little bit of what I listed on the slides. Maybe you've sent some direct messages to a few people on LinkedIn, and maybe you've tried to go to a networking event once or twice, but that's kind of it. And so I think to fully transition, you have to think less and act more. Oftentimes, you might come across a job description and you think, well, I'm not sure. I don't know if I would like to work at that company, or I don't know this. Just apply to it. You might come across someone on LinkedIn and you might say, oh, I don't know if I should reach out to this person. They look a bit senior. They're the CEO, or I don't know if they're the right fit. You're thinking about it too much. Send them a message. So when in doubt, act, make contact. So much of this is a numbers game, right? You might need to talk to 100 people in order to get where it is that you want to go. And I don't think that people fully appreciate that that's the reality. So you got to do more. When in doubt, make contact, think less, act more. And that is the path of the dragon.
Thank you, Ryan. And would you say that perhaps adopting some of a SMART goals kind of mindset could be helpful? Perhaps, making it very specific. Today I have to, or this week I have to do X 5 times. That can be really helpful to kind of push you, I think, out of that space where you're in limbo between being a butterfly and a dragon.
Absolutely, Paugh. Absolutely agree. You will notice, some of you, the keen eye would have noticed that the dragon's approach had numbers, quantifiable goals. I'm going to have 10 conversations with people in my alumni network, and I'm going to have 10 conversations with people in my JET network. Not only is that an effective way for you to proceed, but it's also motivating. There's nothing more debilitating than not really having a plan for your job search and not really knowing what it is that you're trying to do, but going on job sites and applying to a bunch of stuff and then not getting anything back. I mean, it can be devastating, and then you don't know where to go from there. And so by quantifying specific goals, you can achieve those goals. You can say at the end of the week, I had 20 conversations, and that can be very motivating, and it can inspire you to keep going, even if you don't have the result yet.
Thanks, Ryan. The next question is from Victoria. Would you say that an e-portfolio is something that's considered by employers? If so, should I link it to my resume or LinkedIn profile?
Yes. Yes. If you're in a career where you have a portfolio that essentially demonstrates your work, you have to find ways to showcase that. LinkedIn now allows you to add multimedia to your work experience, so you can put elements of your portfolio directly in there such that it's visible. I would put it there, and then I would also put it on any CV.
So a somewhat related question, going back to LinkedIn. This was in the chat and you didn't answer it there, but I would like to answer it live because I think it's a really important question from Ingrid. Should I add JET to my resume and LinkedIn if I was a JET 20 years ago?
Yes. And the reason is that, well, I mean, look, I mean, if you did JET for just 1 year, 20 years ago, and you don't feel like it added, you don't feel like it was a meaningful experience that shaped you as a person, then you can leave it off. But I highly doubt that that's the case. I bet that even if it was 20 years ago, the time you spent on JET was meaningful. And again, most people, guys, don't go live in a foreign country as far away. They don't go and have these experiences. So it's a real differentiator. And whether it was 20 years ago or not, my hypothesis would be that it was a meaningful experience for you, that it shaped you, that you learned a lot from it. And for those reasons, I would include it.
I'd also like to add, I talk to Jets all the time, and I get contacted by people on LinkedIn all the time. Sometimes I don't know why they're contacting me, but if I see in their profile that they're a Jet, I automatically will talk to that person. Whereas if they were contacting me out of the blue and they're not in my career field and they don't seem relevant, I'm less interested in talking to that person. But Jets want to help Jets. And so, you don't know if you're job searching, especially, let's say you're in the field of education. That's a field a lot of Jets go into. You don't know that if your interviewer is going to be a Jet and they look at that resume and they say, oh, this person was a Jet also. That means something significant. And I think in a lot of ways, it's like if you were, I was not in the Greek culture, but in a sorority or a frat or something, there's a connection there that goes beyond just whether you know that person or not. You say, oh, I was a Jet, they were a Jet. It gives you a way to connect with somebody. All right, so next question. Another one about LinkedIn from Jesse. LinkedIn is an amazing tool, but I find it presupposes that steamship/sailboat career model. How do Jets who have experiences in or are open to working in multiple industries make that format work for them?
First, I'd say, Jesse, it's changing. In a largely, the steamboat or sailboat mentality does still exist, mostly in more the traditional industries. So you will see some industry variance in terms of how liberal or conservative they are to someone that has a number of career changes or job changes. But the overall trend, unequivocally, is more open-minded, and several job changes these days is much less detrimental. Now, how do you best position yourself if you are in that position? It comes back to Rum and your story. When I'm hiring, I also sometimes will notice if someone has a lot of job changes, right? I don't decide yet if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do notice it. It's a potential red flag. The difference maker is the story that they tell me. Why did they make these changes? Why did they change these jobs? And if they tell me a story that I believe, that makes sense, then it's not an issue. But if they are trying to describe why it is that they made these changes and it's distorted and none of the pieces fit together, then that's gonna be hard. So what I would do in your CV and in your LinkedIn profile is see if you can weave a thread from experience to experience, job to job, that explains how each experience fed into the next, such that your entire career story makes sense and it doesn't just look like, random pieces that don't fit. Would be my advice. And reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to take a look at your profile to help you, but there's a little bit of massaging that can be done there to make your story feel a little bit more cohesive, even if you've had multiple changes.
Thank you. Sorry, I've had it on mute because I have a very loud cat here who, likes to interrupt my webinars. The next question we have is from Stephen. How best do we reach out to university professors and alumni if we've been out of university for some time, for example, 5, 10, or more years?
Just reach out. Just reach out. Hey, Professor Smith, This is Ryan from Vanderbilt. I'm not sure if you remember me. I graduated 15 years ago, but hey, the reason that I'm reaching out now is because of XYZ. And if you had 20 minutes, I'd be so grateful for a chat. Again, people, you just be shocked at how much people are willing and wanting to help, even complete strangers. I could send 10 messages to 10 alumni at a university I didn't even go to and just say, hey, Catherine, my name's Ryan and I'm reaching out because I love what you're doing and I want to do the same thing. Is there any way that I could steal 20 minutes to hear about your journey? Catherine is almost always going to say yes to that. So I wouldn't let how long you've been out of school deter you from reaching out. You still have the psychological and emotional connection of having gone to the same university, which in the US is a big deal. It's a huge thing. It's not like this in every country, right? There's a kind of kinship there. And especially with Jets, certainly not an issue there. So again, don't overthink it. Reach out, be a dragon, and assume that they want to help because you will find that most people do.
Great, thank you so much. So the next question, and I think we have time to get through the last three, is can you talk a little bit about your career journey from being a JET program ALT to coach? I've been a teacher for 10 years and I'm now trying to make a career change, but I'm having trouble making the transition and convincing potential employers that I can be more than a teacher.
There's a book called Pivot, which I'd recommend picking up. That's the first thing. How I got from JET to coach was through a bunch of pivots. So I'll talk to them briefly. So obviously from JET, I was able to use 2 years in Japan and understand Japanese culture and passing level 2 JLPT to get a foot into the executive search firm in Tokyo. And that got me into sales. And I was able to parlay that into another sales role with LinkedIn. And then while at LinkedIn, I had some sales success and I started helping train some of the new hires. And then I became a trainer. So I moved from sales into training. Training is all about helping people develop. And then I started picking up some coaching skills since I was a trainer. And then I went and got certified as a coach, and then I started coaching. So, I didn't go from JET to coaching. I made small pivots where I could find some overlap between where I was and the skills that I had developed and find a bridge across to where I wanted to go. So if you want to go from teacher to coach feels like a much quicker path. So you just want to think about what are the skills that you've developed as a teacher, write them down, the experiences, and what are the skills that you need as a coach? Look for the overlap and practice telling the story. A teacher is a coach in a lot of ways. And so you want to find the overlap, and then you want to be able to speak to the underlying skills that you've developed and how those apply to being a coach.
Fantastic. Next question is about someone who's not in maybe a typical JET field that JET alumni go into. They ask, what if we can't seem to find any JET alumni connections in our field of choice? I don't know if I'm searching wrong, but I'm not seeing anyone in my chosen career interests, conservation biology. Should I focus on other areas instead?
So what I've laid out for you guys here is a phased approach, starting with the lowest hanging fruit and then moving forward to the next phase. So the lowest hanging fruit is you start with your JET alumni network. If you don't get anything there, then you go to your university alumni network. If you've exhausted that, then you go to, we'll call it the more pure dragon mode. So now you're just looking for anyone that you can find online that's in the conservatory biology, field, and reach out to them. Find authors who have written books. I'm sure if you're in that field, you can find people who are doing what it is that you want to be doing in that field, reach out to them. I've been wanting to get into writing, and I don't have any writers in my JET alumni. I couldn't find any in my university alumni. So there are authors and people who have really successful blogs online. I just tracked them down. I found their websites and I sent them emails. I found them on LinkedIn. I sent them messages on LinkedIn, and I got a hold of 3 or 4 authors who have, sold a million books before, just by reaching out. I don't know them at all, but again, just with these short, personal messages, they're asking for a 20-minute conversation to learn about their journey, because because they're doing what you want to do. You will just be astounded at how often people are looking to help. So if you can't find a JET alumni, don't worry about it. If you can't find university alumni, don't worry about it. Unfortunately, that's your low-hanging fruit, but you can still be a dragon, and you will still find people that are willing to talk to you and tell you how they got to where they got.
And also leverage your personal connections. I put my email in the chat. Feel free to email me. I don't know anyone who's in conservation biology, but I know a lot of JETs, and I know a lot of JETs who know a lot of JETs in interesting fields. So, I work with alumni every day and I want to help. So email me, I'll see what I can do. Maybe it will result in some kind of a connection. You never know. So you just ask people who who they know. All right, this is the last question, and I think this is all we have time for. This is a follow-up to a previous question, the one about the LinkedIn model. It seems to be more of that steamboat model. Jesse asks, I'm thinking about my profile and the I buy wine for restaurants versus the I do just-in-time speech coaching. I'm leaving all of my restaurant content off because it's not as prestigious, but it is time spent with my soft skills. I don't want to muddy the waters. What advice do you have for Jesse in that situation?
So in this situation, it sounds like Jesse is both buying wine for restaurants and providing speech coaching. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah. So I want to assume that Jesse's saying, I have these 2 kind of streams of my professional life, and I've left off the buy wine stuff from my LinkedIn profile. I think that sounds right, Jesse. I mean, LinkedIn as a professional platform is, caters a little bit more to like white collar work, coaching and stuff like that. So send me your, if you can connect with me, Jesse, on LinkedIn, I'll take you a look at your LinkedIn profile. But there are cases where, to your point, where you don't necessarily want to muddy the waters, because if you have I buy wine and I do speech coaching both on there, if I come across your profile, like the story, I have trouble piecing that story together. It might feel a bit disjointed. And so having the, I buy wine for restaurants not on there is probably the right move. But connect with me and I'll take a look at your profile and validate that.
Great. So it's just 9 o'clock Eastern time. We're out of time today. Thank you so much, Ryan, for being with us. Everybody, please do feel free to connect with Ryan on LinkedIn. You can also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. When we send out the recording to this, we'll also pull out the useful information in the chat, such as the books recommended, etc. And we'll include all of those links in the email that we send out to all of you. I'm going to put my name right here in the chat so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. But another resource, join USJET and you can choose whether you would like to be a mentor. You can also search by mentors, and you can search the names of different JETs who are in different fields and different areas. Our directory is growing. We're still a new organization, but we are hoping to put together some kind of more formal mentorship program in the future. So please let us know if that's something that you'd be interested in. All right, well, thank you again, Ryan. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for being with us, and we'll try to get the recording to you within the next week. All right, good night.
Good night, everyone.